One of the things that changed drastically in Windows Server 2008 is installation, and let's talk about what's different about installations in this new server operating system. First of all, you're going to notice it looks very similar. When you do an installation, you're not going to notice a whole lot of difference. Yeah, the graphics are a little different, but it's not really obvious what's going on in the background. But Microsoft has indeed made some significant changes to the way we install operating systems now. They made changes to the actual installation process itself. They made some drastic changes to the way they're packaged on the DVD, and they've made some really cool changes to deployment. So let's talk about those. First thing, the biggest change is that a Microsoft installation for Server 2008 is image based. Now, a lot of administrators have been using images for years. We're talking about things like Norton Ghost and Drive Image and Acronis True Image and all that stuff. They're using the same technology, except Microsoft is using what's called a WIM, a Windows Image File. Now, this replaces the old CAB files. So you'll no longer see CAB files getting copied to the disk and then getting expanded and so forth. So the CAB file is no more. Now let's talk about the installation tools. What's actually happening on an installation now is that we have images of the various versions on a single DVD, and we simply tell the installation program which image we want to copy down. But it's real interesting, and we'll dig into the Windows images in a different video. But there's a number of installation tools that you can now utilize to really take care of all this stuff. The first one is the WAIK. This is the Windows Automated Installation Kit, and this actually got introduced in the Vista days. You can download this. Just go to www.microsoft.com and search for the Windows Automated Installation Kit, and you can download. Now, this thing's over a gigabyte, okay, so it'll take you a while, but you want to download this and install it, and it has quite a few tools in there that you can use. One of the tools is an Application Compatibility Toolkit. Now, this thing is real interesting. You start this off, and this will run whenever an executable file first starts off, and it will check to see if it's okay. It will produce a report for you, and then it will produce an action plan for any known issues with the app that it finds. You can use this to push patches and upgrades to clients in the future. So this is not used just for installations, but it can be used for other things as well. Now, the next tool that you'll need to be aware of is the BDD, or the Business Desktop Deployment. This tool, again, can be downloaded from Microsoft's website, and it is really a whole family of tools and technologies, and we won't go into them in this course. It's too complicated, and it's going to be unique to various installations. But the bottom line is Microsoft is starting to divide their deployment technologies up into small, medium, and large, and the BDD is the large business deployments. Now, what's driving this is information that Microsoft's learning from their research that it can take as much as $1,000 per client machine in most corporate environments to deploy that machine, and that's something that that price or that number needs to come down, and so they're beginning to work on that. So the bottom line here in this video is when you do an installation on Windows Server 2008, it's not going to look drastically different, but you need to understand there are some serious architectural changes under the hood, and in some of the next few videos we're going to talk about some of the cool things you can do because of those changes that are going on in the background. Now, before we go too much deeper into installations and Windows imaging and so forth, I want to kind of stop here for a second and talk to you about the pre-installation environment in Windows Server 2008 and tell you about something really cool that has happened. When you begin an installation of the Windows Server 2008 operating system, you actually boot up not into the old DOS world like you used to do. This actually started with Windows Vista, but they've made a change in Server 2008 that's really cool. In Vista and in Windows Server 2008, you actually boot up into a different environment. It's called the WinPE environment, and WinPE 2.0 is what's being used. Now, what you're really doing is you're booting into a lightweight bootable version of Windows Server 2008. Now, where this came from is Microsoft originally developed it for use by their large OEMs, Dell, HP, and those guys. And it also came from the Microsoft consulting world. And think of this thing as MS-DOS with networking on steroids. It is a really, really cool tool. Now, what's neat about this is it's a great tool for administrators. The problem is prior to Windows Server 2000 and the new WAIK, the Automated Installation Kit, you couldn't actually get your hands on a copy of this thing. But it is now part of that Automated Installation Kit, and you can use it, okay? Now, this thing can still be downloaded as a separate tool. If your company has an OEM agreement or volume license agreement or a developer's relationship with Microsoft through one of their developer programs, you can download this. Now, what's really cool is this tool has some great features to it. First of all, it includes disk part. And you can use this to create and modify partitions and volumes. This replaces the old format command. But here's the real cool one, ImageX. This will capture and modify system images as WIMs, and that means exactly what it appears to mean. I can use ImageX inside WinPE to create my own image of my hard disk if I would like. PE image will create and modify the WinPE images offline, which means once I've created an image, I can go edit that image offline using the PE image tool. Now, WinPE, when you install it, will run for 72 hours once you start it, and then it shuts down and goes away. Okay. Now, let's talk about some other aspects of this. First of all, this is not intended for the average user. Microsoft has kept this away from us intentionally. They are now exposing it through the Automated Installation Kit, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So all you're going to do is download the Automated Installation Kit and you'll have access to it. Now here's something that's interesting. It's really not licensed for anything other than a Windows Server installation. So I'm just going to leave that with you for what it's worth. To use this thing for anything other than a Windows Server installation is against the license that you've been granted with the Automated Installation Kit. So just wanted to let you know that this thing is out there. It's a different way to think. I will tell you, if you go out to Google and look around the internet, you will see some step-by-steps on how you can create your own bootable CDs that you can use on your Windows Server installation to go in and correct problems. It is a fabulous administrator tool. So just want to let you know about this. Go out there and kind of do some digging around and playing with this thing. I think you'll really like it. Now, before we go too much further, I want to dig into this Windows imaging format because this thing is really, really huge. The Windows imaging format, again, it's basically ghosting, but this is sector-based copying. Now, what's really cool is with sector-based copying, we can do some really neat things with these images. Microsoft's WIM, or Windows imaging format, is basically a technology built around single instance container files, and these are supported by a Windows imaging format API. Okay, which is an application programming interface, which means that you can build software applications to look at these files and to manipulate them. So what you're going to start to see is third-party applications and products. There's actually one in the Automated Install Kit that will let you do this already, that I can view the contents of a Windows image file offline, and I can edit the contents of an image file offline. Now that is huge. That means that I can take an image of part of one of my server disks, and then I can store that image somewhere, and then I can use a software utility to then open that image and actually edit it. Now, hold on to all that for a second. Let's talk about what this lets us do. By making these images and them having single instance container files that they're in, this is how Microsoft is pushing all versions of Server 2008 on one disk. So you'll get one DVD for Windows Server 2008, and whether you're installing Data Center or Enterprise or Standard or whatever version you're installing, Web Edition, it's all going to be on that one disk. You're basically, in the install, based on what you choose and the product key you put in, you're telling it which image to copy or to deploy onto your particular disk. Now, let's talk about the SIM, the System Image Manager. This is one of those software tools that I talked about a few minutes earlier. This allows you to actually access these Windows image files. Now, what are the advantages of all this? First of all, faster deployment. If you've ever used a Ghost program, it is fascinating. I'll never forget the first time I saw this. A guy talked to us. He's talked about this new idea called ghosting, and they called it disk cloning back then. And we thought, yeah, sure, we've heard all this before. It's going to be great. And we watched an install that used to take almost an hour, take about maybe 12 to 14 minutes. I don't remember. It was unbelievable. We were just in shock that that had happened that way. What's really cool with the Windows imaging format is we have easy management of these images. Now here's what's really cool. Since we can edit these images, I can take an image of a server, and then a service pack can come in and I can apply the service pack to that image. Understand, I don't have to rebuild the system off of that image, apply the service pack and re-image and all this sort of stuff. Okay, this is absolutely huge. I can just simply add the service pack changes to the image, and the image is ready to deploy. I can create and deploy images on my own. The ImageX tool from the Windows Automated Installation Kit will take care of that, and I can download that kit from www.microsoft.com. Now, there's a tremendous amount of flexibility in this whole idea of using images. It's now possible to apply a WIM file that will not overwrite existing files. Okay, so that means that I can write an image on top of an existing installation, and it will simply add changed file. It'll add the new files to it. Okay, it won't overwrite existing files. So you can see Microsoft's headed some really cool places with this stuff. Okay, so you need to go out and read up on this. Now, do you have to know this to install Windows? No. Is this something a good administrator should understand going forward? Absolutely. There are some cool tricks here to really separate yourself from the other guys out there and to really be able to do some cool things when it comes to server installation, deployment, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so get your arms around these kind of tools and this technology, and you can really differentiate yourself out there in the real world. Now let's take a closer look at this Windows Automated Installation Kit. This is something that you'll have to go download separately off of Microsoft's website. It's quite a large file. This thing is approximately, I don't know, 1.2 gigs or something like that. So it's going to take it a while to come down. You're going to get an ISO file. So you're going to want to take this ISO, burn it to a DVD, and then you will install this onto a machine. Now, we can use this to push out other Windows servers. We can push out our desktop operating systems and so forth. What I want to show you here is I downloaded it, I burned it to a DVD, and what you're seeing here is the beginning of the installation of the Windows Automated Installation Kit. And I just want to show you the power this thing has. I won't go through it all, but I'm going to show you how to get started with it. Okay, notice it says Windows Vista, and again, I've already mentioned in this course there's a very close marriage between the technologies that brought us Windows Vista and now that is bringing us Windows Server 2008. Okay, so a lot of the tools that you're going to see in Windows Server 2008 will say Windows Vista on them. Okay, but notice if I click on Getting Started for IT Pros, I want you to see what Microsoft's providing you. First of all, notice this applies to Vista with Service Pack 1 and Windows Server 2008. Now let me pause here just a second. Vista is the standard client for Windows Server 2008, but not just Vista, but Vista with Service Pack 1. So always keep that in mind. But notice what Microsoft's doing here. They're going to take you through using the Windows Automated Installation Kit, okay? But notice they're going to give you a deployment scenario here. They talk about the requirements of what you need and so forth. They're going to take you step by step through building a lab environment. The first step, you're going to create an answer file. They're going to show you step by step how to create it and how to build it. Then notice they're going to talk about various settings and so forth. Then they're going to show you how to build a master installation. Okay, so you're going to do an installation of your operating system. You're going to run sysprep. Notice now you're going to use that Windows PE, and in a previous video, we talked about PE and what a cool thing this is, but we're going to use ImageX, which is a tool inside Windows PE, to create, notice, a bootable image. And they've got the steps here. They have all the command line prompt commands that you need to execute to take care of this. They take you through the whole step. Then you're going to capture and store the installation onto a network share with ImageX. You're going to create an image. Then they're going to tell you how to deploy the image. Okay, and they'll tell you how on your destination computer how to kick this off. Notice this is step by step by step. Now there are some other things that you can do with the automated installation kit. They have some release notes. Notice you can access the Windows Deployment Services update package for Windows Server 2003. You can kind of browse this whole DVD. You can install the .NET Framework 2.0 on here. There's MS XML set up. Let me click on Browse the DVD, and you'll notice there's quite a bit of things on here that you can see and that you can dig into. Notice here is the WinPE. This is that file I was talking about a little earlier. A lot of stuff going on here. There's a docs file. Notice there's some white papers in here. Great information for you. Let me expand this just a little bit. Notice there's some error diagnostic guides. There's the Getting Started HTML document that we viewed just a few minutes ago. So I would strongly recommend that you spend some time getting to know this automated installation kit, especially those tools that are inside there. Now I've kicked off just a bare bones new installation of Windows Server 2008, and what I've done is I've just put the CD, or the DVD I should say, into the DVD drive, and it clicked and hummed for a few seconds, and it came up to this. First of all, the language to install, and you'll notice I can make some changes here. The time and currency format, keyboard or input method for the most part, I'll leave those alone, and I click next, and now it just tells me that I'm ready to install. Now notice I can check to see any kind of pre-installation things I need to check through. Notice it has my minimum and recommends hardware requirements and so forth, all kinds of various information. Notice I can repair the computer if I need to, check the disk. So I'll just click on Install Now. And notice it's going to ask me to wait. Now something that's really cool about the installations, and it's one of those things that when you see it you're like, duh, why didn't somebody think of this before? Is that when we're installing an operating system in the past, it would run for 10 or 15 minutes and stop and ask you a question. And so, you know, you'd kick it off and go get involved in a phone call or some other fire's going somewhere, you're trying to put it out. And you'd come back and your installation ran 5-10 minutes and stopped, and it's waiting on you to give it an administrator password or something. And so you've got to answer that, then you leave and it runs 15 more minutes and stops, and you got to answer a question. And it does this 3 or 4 times. On the new installations, notice it's going to pop up here and say, what do you want to install? Notice full or server core installation choices. I'll give them both. We'll talk about both of these a little bit later. Right now, we're just going to do a Windows Enterprise full installation. But the point is, notice step 1, it's going to collect information from me, and it's going to ask for things like passwords and all that stuff. And once it starts installing Windows, it does not stop. And it takes about 45 minutes for that installation to run. So I'm going to answer a few of these questions, and I will say full install, and it's going to ask me to agree to all this, and so I'll pull it down and let you read all that. Okay, you got it? Everybody agree with all that? Okay, we're going to accept that and go. And now it's going to ask me, do I want to upgrade or do I want to do a custom advanced? Upgrade's disabled because there's nothing on the disk out there that I'm installing. So I'm going to click on the installation, and it says where you're going to put it. I've got some unallocated disk space out there, and I will answer that question. And it will take that, it'll go do some gyrations. Notice it's going to copy files, and notice it says that's all the information we need right now. Your computer will restart several times during the installation. Okay, now I'm done. Pretty cool stuff. It is going to install it with a blank password on the administrator account. I'll change that as soon as it comes up. Okay, so notice it just copied my files. It will now take a few minutes to expand those files, and again, it's not going to ask me questions about a whole bunch of do you want to do this, do you want to do that, because it's not going to install any features or roles, right? It's just going to put the server up, and let me decide later what roles I want to put on it, what features I want to put on it, and so forth. Okay, now if you remember from some of the previous videos, you're looking at this. Does it look drastically different than what we've done before? No, the graphics are a little slicker, but the absolute bottom line is it's now deploying an image to the volume that I told it to install it to. It will simply add that image out there. You can see we're already at 5%. This thing will run. I can now go to lunch, go do whatever I want to do. This thing will run. It'll restart a couple of times, and when I come back after about 45 minutes, Windows Server will be sitting there ready for me to log in, set an administrator password, install some roles, and take off from there. Okay, how easy can it get? Very, very simple. Very easy. It doesn't take a whole lot of hassle from me. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of wasting time right now. I'm just sitting here talking, but I wanted to get it across to you that this thing just really installs itself almost. We just kick it off, get out of the way. So that's a bare bones installation, total fresh copy installation, not an upgrade, onto a disk, right off the Windows Server 2008 installation DVD. Okay, in part 2 of installing Windows Server 2008, I just want to kind of go through this whole installation process with you. And this is going to look kind of funky for you watching the video because I'm actually going to start the recording and talk a few seconds and show you some of the steps, and then I'm going to pause it so you're going to see this thing in a greatly compressed time frame. But in part 1, put the disk in, started installing, talked about the what's going on in the background and collecting information and so forth. We're now in step 2, installing Windows, and as you can tell, it's given us a progress report. We've got quite a ways to go. We've been running now probably about 8 or 9 minutes. We're expanding. We've expanded 67-68% of the file. My machine's probably running slightly slower than what yours is going to do because I'm in a virtual environment. So you know, yours may run slightly less than this. On average, these things are taking around 45 minutes to install. So I'm going to pause and I'll join back up with you in a few seconds, and we'll kind of watch this thing progress as it goes. Okay, as you can see, we've now completed expanding the files, and we should very soon here move to actually beginning the features installation. And this will go a few minutes and we'll install updates and complete the installation. And notice how quickly we're starting to move through now, and so I'll be back with you in a few minutes. So we've completed the installation. We're going to have a restart here. This is our first restart, by the way, and we'll see the server actually shut down, come back up and restart. We're just going to leave our hands off of it. We're going to let it take care of things. The resolution is going to mess up on the video here. You're going to see some pretty bizarre stuff, and there we go. It should jump back into your view here in just a second. So here we go. We're rebooting. I'll join you back again once we're up and running and show you what's happening at that point. So now we're just kind of watching this message flash a couple of hundred times here. Please wait while Windows sets up your computer, and nothing too exciting or flashy going on, but the installation is progressing smoothly. We're probably, I don't know, 30 minutes in, 35 minutes in, and so I'll let you know. I'll join you again when something else happens. Well, let's just hold on here. Here we go. We're continuing to boot up, and again, what I really like about this is I haven't touched this thing since I told it what version of Windows to put in. Okay, so the thing just kind of runs. So after maybe 3 or 4 minutes, we jumped back into the graphical portion of this, and it's advising me now that it's completing the installation. Notice how far we've moved on the status bar down here, and so we're beginning to work through this thing very nicely. And so I'll join you again near the completion. Okay, and so we have rebooted one more time, and so that was 2 reboots on the installation, but again, I haven't had to touch anything. On this last time it started up, and notice it is informing me the user's password must be changed before logging on the first time. And so I will click OK, and it's going to ask for a new password. Now it's going to ask for a certain level of complexity, and so I'm going to use one of the standard passwords that you'll use if you go to an official Microsoft class, and that is the capital P @SSW0RD. And I will click here, it will change that password. And I guess what I should have done is shown you, if I try to do anything too simple or not complex enough, it will just tell me, no, you can't use that. It violates the security policy of the computer. There is a default one there. So notice it just basically did all the reboots and stuff with a blank administrator password, forced me to change it on the way in. It's now preparing my desktop, and notice that's how easy it is to do a Windows Server 2008 Enterprise install. Took maybe 35 minutes on my machine. Again, going into a virtual environment, you will get probably better service on number one, better equipped machines, and then not going into virtual environments. But there we are. Notice we're up and running. And so what this thing is going to do now is show me just the recycle bin on the desktop, and it will eventually kick off. Here we go. The initial configuration task wizard, and it's telling me, for example, to set my time zone, configure networking, provide a computer name and a domain. Notice we did not join a domain, didn't even ask us about that. So now we have to join a domain and so forth. And if we're going to set up Active Directory, we will look at that later on this very machine, and we can enable automatic updating and feedback, and we can add roles. Let me scroll on down. Add features, enable remote desktop, configure our firewall. Right now it's just on. Okay, so I will close this, and now you'll notice that it is now going to take me directly into the Server Manager. I haven't done anything. I just closed that window. It took me into Server Manager, and now I can start to, notice, set roles, set features, and we'll look at diagnostics and configuration and some other things a little bit later on in the course. Okay, so there's a basic Windows Server 2008 install. I hope that gives you an idea of what you're up against, that you get to see one and you kind of know what to expect. Now there is one thing that I want to point out to you that would really come into handy, especially for those of you who haven't had any experience in a large corporate computing environment, and that is the Microsoft Solutions Framework. Now this might look to you, when you look at it, like, oh, this is a bunch of busy work, it's project management kind of stuff, and nobody wants to really do that a whole lot. When you get into a large environment, you really need to take care of this stuff. You need to understand that the Microsoft Solutions Framework comes directly from Microsoft's consulting group. So these are best practices that these people have figured out, determined, come to conclusions on as a result of real-world experiences of working in large heterogeneous environments. Okay, now what you're going to see when you look at the Solutions Framework on Microsoft's site is a lot of very general guidelines, but some of the case studies that you will find out there have to do with Windows operating system deployments, and there is a ton of really good information. For example, a Microsoft Solution Framework provides organizational framework of principles, models, guidelines, how to deal with a team, how to deal with responsibilities and so forth, recommended practices on how to organize and pull all this stuff off, how to deal with your people, informational resources on where to get tons of information to read, make sure you get your hands around this whole thing, and then planning guides, actually step-by-step planning guides on carrying this out. They will also direct you to software tools required for the implementations that they suggest. And again, what you're looking at here are documents created by this consulting team in large environments. Okay, so be very sensitive when you read this. This is not for a little 1 or 2 person, small company, but for those of you who are trying to jump up to speed and try to land those jobs out there in large corporate environments, you need to read this stuff. Being able to understand this stuff and jump into this environment would help you tremendously, because in a large corporate environment you may have 4 or 5 levels of administrators. I've worked in those environments where as an administrator I could do certain things, but parts of the program weren't open to me. I had to have people skills. I had to have the knowledge to not break something else when I did something. I had to constantly work in the context of the team and make sure that I wasn't doing anything on an island that would create hassles or problems for somebody else. And that's what the Solutions Framework is all about, bringing all those resources together to have a successful, cost-effective rollout for whatever you're doing. Notice the website link here. It's microsoft.com/technet/solution-accelerators/MSF default.mspx. You can also just go to Microsoft.com, do a search for Solutions Framework or Microsoft Solutions Framework. Again, my suggestion, this is really not intricate to Windows Server 2008, but most businesses that are employing or deploying Windows Server 2008 are going to be large businesses, and this is great real-world reading and understanding of some of what these environments are like for you. Okay, so this is kind of an aside from the course, but I wanted to throw it in and let you know that this kind of stuff's out there. It's really, really good reading for you to let you see kind of what you're stepping into in a large corporate environment and how to go about rolling out these operating systems in that world. Now, before we leave the topic of installing the operating system, I want to mention Windows Deployment Services. This is added to Windows Server 2008, and it's actually an enhancement. WDS, or Windows Deployment Services, actually replaces the old RIS, or Remote Installation Services. Now, when I say it replaces it, you can still use RIS if you have that in place, but WDS is a better alternative, trust me. WDS gets installed as a server role. So we'd go into Server Manager and create a server role for a server, and we can still use our old RIS images. If you have those, you'll use WDS basically in what's called legacy mode, and that will allow you to continue to use those RIS images. Now, for Vista deployments, WDS is better, and as a matter of fact, it's probably required. RIS had some serious issues with Vista, and it took a lot of banging and clanging to get it to work. WDS performs remote boots, which is really the cool way to go. It utilizes a client-server protocol and will actually push the installation down to a client that booted into a PXE or Pixie server extension. Now, the Pixie server is turned on through the Windows Deployment Services Microsoft Management Console tool that shows up once you install this role on the server. Now, when you start to look at Windows Deployment Services, there's a lot of different ways you can go, but there's two types of installations that roughly these things fall into. The first one's called a light touch installation, and this is where you're going to have an image on your WDS server, and a user out there can basically be booted or can remote boot, and then you can do an installation of an image, but this requires some sort of initiation by the administrator. So the administrator has to do something to cause this to happen. Now, this works great for phased installations. Say you've got 40 desktops that need to be deployed, and you're going to get 5 of them at a time every afternoon or every morning or whatever, or every weekend. And so you can actually kick these off and have the ones that you want to go taken care of. Now, there's also an option called zero touch installations. It's kind of the Cadillac version. This is policy based, and by that we mean group policy based, which means that these are automated deployments. So when the user logs in or the computer logs onto the network, group policy can watch for that, and it can automatically push an installation out to that particular machine. This is a great enhancement to RIS, and I think you'll like this a lot better. Having said that, you'll have to go out and look at the documentation on Windows Deployment Services, and you can find some white papers and stuff out on Microsoft's website by the time this is finished and you actually get this course. Microsoft continues to put a lot of information out there, and you're going to see some show up on Windows Server 2008 for quite a while. If when you get this video you don't see that stuff out there quite yet, keep a check on it and look in some of the third-party books out there in the bookstores and so forth. Look in the help files as well. You'll see some information. Now I want to show you this, so let me get out to the Server Manager. So I jumped out to the desktop. Now let's kick off the Server Manager, and I just want to show you real quickly how to get this started. I'm not going to go through it. The whole idea of deployment can get very unique and personal for your particular network and situation. Notice I'm going to go add a role, and notice I've already added this in a previous exercise, but if I go next, you'll just see that it's a role out here that I can choose. If it wasn't installed, I would just choose it. I would say next. It'll click and hum for a few minutes. The Windows Deployment Services gets installed, and then I'm done there. Now what's interesting about this, I'll cancel the wizard here. After I have installed it, it automatically shows up over here inside my Server Manager under the Windows Deployment Services Snap-in. And so I can expand that, and you can see the servers that have that. Now notice it's saying, wait a minute dude, you haven't configured this yet. Okay, to configure it, select the server and this is the only one that has it in my domain. It's actually the only domain in my only server in my domain. I can go to the action menu and say configure server, or I can just right click on the server and say configure server. And notice it's going to tell me that it needs to be a member of an Active Directory domain services. It needs to have active DHCP on my network, active DNS, and an NTFS partition on the Windows deployment service. Then it's going to ask me the path and the folder name for the remote installation folder, and I can keep going through here. And it's also going to warn me here, wait a minute, this is the same one as the system volume. We recommend you put it somewhere else. And then we start to answer questions about the Pixie server initial settings. Don't respond to any client computer, respond only to known client computers, on and on and on. And you can go through and we will say don't respond to any client computer for now. Notice it's going to just set this up, configure it, and then I will be ready to continue on. Very easy to set this stuff up. All you need to do now is go out, look in some of the documentation, get your image, put it in the right place, and continue on from there. And notice it's asking me, do I want to add images to the deployment server now? So anyway, I just wanted you to know this is out there. You need to read up and study on this and learn how to make this fit into whatever situation, whatever environment you're working in. But this is the Windows Deployment Services, and again, it runs as a role on a server.